Major Garrett joins us now from Warsaw, Poland. So at this point, Major, we've heard the president speak twice in Poland earlier this morning, and then he just wrapped up a big speech. Biggest takeaway from you?
So the biggest takeaway from the news conference was the president said he has some very serious options to deal with North Korea militarily. But then he said, that doesn't mean I'm going to use them. And he also created this sort of vague timeline of weeks and months with which the United States will try to marshal international opposition of a new and more effective kind against North Korea. And what that really basically means is trying to figure out a way to limit North Korea's access to financial capital and labor and trade. Much of the trade comes through China, and there are lots of other nations that provide at some level some access to capital through banking and other means, and some access to labor for the North Korean regime. And it was made clear by the UN ambassador from the United States, Nikki Haley, yesterday at the Security Council that a very big part of the Trump agenda going forward immediately will be to try to cut off that access to labor and financial capital for the North Korean regime, to try to put a vice-like grip of sanctions, depriving it of that which it needs to function. And if that's not successful, the Trump administration is increasingly talking about, in general terms, military options, all of which alarm the Chinese, the South Koreans, the Japanese, and everyone throughout the region. And Trump administration officials have said that is the least attractive option. They are not saber rattling or trying not to saber rattle, but they're also saying an intercontinental ballistic missile armed North Korea with nuclear warheads is intolerable, will not be tolerated, and a lot of new steps are going to have to be taken. The emphasis right now appears to be on diplomacy and working through these means of cutting off access to capital and labor. If they're unsuccessful, other things will have to be contemplated. That was takeaway number one. Number two, the president again said, well, Russia was involved in the 2016 election in an unwelcome and cyber-intrusive way, but other countries were too. Persistently, he never names the other countries or individuals. He just leaves it out there as something that others were participating in. And he also said that this happens a lot, and it's happened before. Those last two parts of the president's answer are kind of consistent with what the Russians have been saying. They're not exactly Russian talking points, but they're in the ballpark. And so that's an interesting prelude, as far as I'm concerned, to the president's first face-to-face meeting with Vladimir Putin in Hamburg, Germany tomorrow. We still have no idea how long that meeting is going to be, what the formal agenda, if there is one, is going to be. We do know from the Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, Syria will be raised, but there is no particular confidence the Trump administration has that the Russians will be cooperative in Syria or on any other of the range of issues that are certainly out there, but haven't been officially identified by the Trump administration as high priorities.
Yeah, the president also brought up the weapons of mass destruction that did not exist, and that's another sort of talking point of critics of American foreign policy. But then he reiterated, and he said it both in his the Q&A earlier in the morning and then his speech, the desire to work with Poland to combat the destabilizing activities of Russia in the region.
Right. And what are those destabilizing activities? The president simply has not identified Russian meddling in the 2016 election as one of those destabilizing activities. He did identify Crimea, and he said Russia's backing of the regimes in Iran and Syria are destabilizing. And he also, without specifically mentioning Article 5 of the NATO Charter, did say the United States is committed to deterring all forms of military aggression throughout Europe. That comes much closer to embracing that Article 5 commitment in the NATO Charter than the president did on his first European trip, and is certainly a welcome message here in Poland, which regards itself, as does the United States, a so-called frontline state on the edge of possible Russian military adventurism, if in fact Moscow were to move in that direction. It is something that is of deep concern here in Poland and throughout the Baltic region. Frontline states are nervous about Russia's military intentions, so that statement from the president very much embraced here in Poland. But it is still completely unclear what the president's policy toward Russia aspires to be or even will try to be. And there are some fears in the U.S. diplomatic community that the Russians, as they always will come very prepared with a whole roster of things that they want to talk to the U.S. about and agenda items they want to get on their side of the ledger. And if the Trump administration, and specifically President Trump, are not as sufficiently prepared or ready, they may be at a disadvantage. We don't know. We'll have to see. But that is something that is a concern sort of hovering around this first meeting between President Trump and President Putin.
Yeah, indeed, Major Garrett, it appears that Vladimir Putin's reputation for being prepared is somewhat legendary versus President Trump, who seems to take a more casual approach. Certainly two different styles. Everyone's going to be watching them very closely. Everyone's going to be watching that first handshake and reading entirely too much into it, I am sure. And hopefully we'll get a chance to talk to you a little bit later. Major Garrett, thank you very much.